Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
The Projection Booth is single-handedly the greatest film podcast you could ever listen to or could possibly want.
Top notch. 5 stars. This has quickly become one of my favorite film-related podcasts. Always interesting.
A completely unpretentious yet fully comprehensive look at films from all genres.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
You are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast. Here are Lisa and Darren.
Welcome to another edition of the ITMOD podcast. Joining me is Lisa Gullickson, wife Dork.
Hello.
And also joining me is Billy Das, the indie dork. Yay!
Yay, Dorkness!
I've been named.
He's been christened. We dumped water on him.
No, they did. It was like
it was wet.
It was very wet.
It's official now. Shit got real. You have a dork name officially, right?
I'm excited.
Indie dork. All right.
Indie dork. You may call
That's
me
the entire reason he's here. He's
Indie
like,
dork.
just give me a dork name.
Obviously, after Indiana Jones.
Well, what a better, no better time than to have your cemented dork name than with this new interview for our
You did
ITMOD
have to
CHATcast.
land a whale to get that name. You had to land a whale, and you did.
I kind of did.
You totally did.
All right, Ahab dork. Let the audience know what's in store. What we got for our next edition of ITMOD CHATcast.
Today,
Yeah.
on the ITMOD CHATcast,
Yep.
we have
Uh-huh.
Karyn Kusama. Yes, that's right. You know her as the director of Girl Figh,
Yep.
the director of Aeon Flux, the director of Jennifer's Body,
Hey.
which I love, and the director of one of my favorite movies of last year,
And
The Invitation.
And ITMOD Film Club pick.
ITMOD Film Club.
And
Hashtag.
not just ITMOD Film Club pick generally, inaugural pick.
That's right.
Of
That's
ITMOD
right.
Film Club.
Thanks to Lisa Gullickson.
My idea.
Yeah.
Hat on the air.
Yeah.
I am a genius.
Yep. She is. So this was a really good interview. I particularly had fun sitting back and judging everyone while this took place.
He was holding up numbers and shit.
It was a lot of pressure.
A lot of 8s. He gave us a lot of 8s.
Yeah.
Are 8s good? I guess out of 10,
Yeah,
they're
they're
pretty
better
good.
than 6s. So,
Yeah.
you know.
I saw a lot of 6s on my end, Lisa.
Oh,
Damn
Billy.
it.
But if you really want to know, check out my letterbox rating for this interview. So yeah, thank you again, Billy, for setting this up, and not even just this specific interview, but the ITMOD CHATcast thing that we have going on.
Yeah.
Thank you
altogether.
guys for being so fucking awesome.
We
And-
can't help it. We don't have a choice.
I know. I would.
It's just that's just.
Crippling
Okay,
self-doubt is taking
Let's
over.
stop congratulating each other.
All right.
And let us push our listeners into this amazing interview, because it is amazing, and she was so generous with her time.
Yes.
And you spoiler alert, there's gonna be some fucking wisdom dropped on you guys. You're gonna have a whole new perspective on life.
Life-changing shit.
So check it out, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Here it is, the ITMOD CHATcast with Karyn Kusama.
Hi. So welcome along to the podcast. Today with us for the ITMOD CHATcast, we have Karyn Kusama. I'm so excited that you're here. You are the director of Girl Figh, Aeon Flux, Jennifer's Body, most recently The Invitation, which was a huge hit with us.
Amazing.
I actually, Lisa and I both today watched Girl Figh earlier in the day. I thought that was a movie that I had seen before, and it turns out I'd been missing out for 17 years. Holy shit, that was really good.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
I did notice before Billy did that the guy's name was Adrian. It was not lost on me. I got that. I got that sweet ref.
So I think that's kind of where we'd like to start off is, The Invitation was a huge hit for us. On Film School Rejects, we loved it there. The ITMODcast podcast, they have a film club event, and a review and engagement with The Invitation was actually their first event for it. So
It inspired that whole segment, because every week we talk about the movies that we watched, and I had just watched The Invitation, and I was like, I just saw this amazing movie, and sorry, I can't tell you anything about it. But then I had the idea of, well, if you're listening, you have to watch this movie, and then we did a whole invitation episode where, you know, we engaged with our listeners and they would tweet in and talk about it. And it was just, it's the kind of movie where you just want to infect people with it. You just want to make other people watch it so you can talk about it endlessly.
Oh, well, that's nice. How did the podcast go?
Amazing. You should listen to it. You'd be very flattered because we loved it so much. I'm actually trying not to just completely dork out right now. It's not working, but...
Okay, so the invitation, it was a fan favorite. It was an indie darling. I think that it was a financial success. It was a winner all around. What has life been like post the invitation? What's this last year been like for you? What have you been up to?
It's been really great, actually. I've sort of been able to have a lot more kinds of opportunities in front of me. I think in a weird way, the fact that the invitation was both a genre movie, but also kind of a curious hybrid in that it also was sort of an adult drama, and that it kind of sunk its teeth in at the end the way that it does, kind of gave people a sense that, you know, something that I've always felt to be true about myself, but hasn't necessarily always been public knowledge, which is that I'm a serious filmmaker. Like, I want to make movies that kind of, you know, prod at our messy parts. And so I've been lucky because I feel like there have been some really interesting new opportunities in front of me, and just a lot of, you know, positive interest, which I know at some point will go away or be, you know, sort of just I am having my flavor of the month moment, but in the end I know that will end. But I'm enjoying it while it lasts because it's really nice to get a little bit more sort of, you know, a broader discussion in front of me about what kind of movies people are interested in me for, and it gets me to really think hard about the kind of movies I want to be making right now. And it's just great. It's all good.
I'd like to expand on that thought just a little bit. I mean, because, you know, one of the focuses that we're really talking about is independent filmmaking here, and we've interviewed a lot of small budget folks at this point. What is it? So now you've had this crowning success, and you are. I mean, flavor of the month. Sure, I think of you as a serious filmmaker, and I'm glad that people are presenting you with opportunities like that. But how are you going about picking and choosing what you want to do? Or are you looking for the next project that satisfies you creatively with your creative partners? Are you looking at it like what's going to be the most financially successful? Or are you thinking 2 moves ahead? Like, how is this chess game being played from your perspective right now?
You know, for me, and I feel this way kind of as somebody who has straddled kind of the indie world and the studio world. I don't really know how to work without feeling like my creative engagement is 100%. And so probably to the endless chagrin of all of my representation, I'm never thinking about money, like literally never. And so maybe that's not always the smartest way to go, but for me, I really feel like you have to kind of love the script, love the idea, love the show, whatever it is that your one is working on. And so I've been really lucky to have that opportunity to kind of keep working on things I like. But in terms of the stuff that I'm thinking about doing next, it's always stuff that just keeps me up at night, you know, just stuff that I can't let go of, that just feels too good to pass up.
Something that inspires me about your work is that you always want to stick to your specific vision. Like in the case of Girl Figh, really insisting on a Latina actress, even if you could get the film made sooner, switching to a better known white actress. So you have this uncompromising vision, but in smaller budget indie films, you know, things come up and you're having to compromise every day, where you might not necessarily have that with the studio film. Like, how do you navigate that?
I think that's an interesting question. I mean, I feel like in indie films, what's really crucial is that you have a very strong sense of truly what's most important about the story that you're telling. And so in the case of Girl Figh, which, was my first film and was made literally for the same amount of money that The Invitation, my last film, was made for.
Yeah.
So it was truly a return to kind of my roots in making The Invitation. With Girl Figh, I always knew that the story had to be about the reality of this character, and that her environment shaped her character. That like living in the projects with an absent parent and an abusive parent creates and being overlooked for sort of all kinds of messed up cultural reasons, creates the character that she is and creates the problems in her life. And so for me, it just sort of always felt true that the character, if she came from Red Hook, Brooklyn, had to be Latina. She just had to be, so it kind of was one of those things where I was willing to make other kinds of compromises about shot selection and equipment and how much time I had during the days and how much time I had in the cutting room and how much money I had for source music. But there were certain elemental factors that I wasn't willing to compromise on, because otherwise the movie didn't make any sense to me anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's something that stands out to me, especially between watching Girl Figh and The Invitation, is that Girl Figh's grounded in reality. Like, I mean, this is a true story. Effectively, I mean, this is a story of somebody encountering a human thing that's very normal and a struggle that you can get behind and relate to. The Invitation is much more. It becomes very gonzo, but it's rooted in sincerity. I think the characters start out very earnest. Is the earnestness of characters, the realness of characters, something that you think is important as you're approaching any topic? Whether it's something that ends so wildly as The Invitation, or it's something that's so down to earth as Girl Figh.
That's also a really interesting question. I mean, I think for me, earnestness isn't quite the word I would use, but I think there is maybe something to this idea of, is there authenticity to this character? Because some of my favorite movies are incredibly theatrical statements. And so, I don't know if I would say the protagonist, say, of A Clockwork Orange is earnest, but there's an authentic quality to the conception of his character. So even if it's a theatrical quality, it also has a truth to it. And so that definitely is true for me, that the characters that I'm most drawn to, even in their most outlandish expressions, have something I relate to in them, that feels just honest, even if it, it's like we watch Taxi Driver over and over again, because even though we may not quite understand Travis Bickle, there's something about him that feels very true. And so that to me, I think is an important part of what I look for in the movies I'm hoping to make.
And so, those projects coming to you, so sort of referencing back to, being the flavor of the month, so to speak, where everybody wants to, I'm stuck on that. Sorry. I shouldn't keep bringing up that turn of phrase. When you are a hot commodity and people want to engage with you and work with you, and they're bringing these ideas to you, is it studios that are coming to you, or is it smaller, smaller budget projects with singular filmmakers or writers that whose work or body of work that that you want to use this moment that you have to galvanize some interest in something that might not get a green light? Like what's that kind of decision making process, and then how much of that becomes relating to characters? Like if you were thinking, well, gosh, I really want to work with this small budget person that can do this thing, but a studio project came along and it was just like, well, shit, I get these characters. I completely connect with them. Is that like, what's the top of the line for you for how you make this choice? I think that's kind of what I'm getting into, is how do you decide?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's really, it's kind of just like I take this like gut check test with myself about just about the level to which I'm gonna throw myself into investigating these characters and this story, and how much, for me, because I really kind of depend on, well, for me, I imagine that cinema needs to be at its purest form, visual storytelling. If I'm reading a script or reading a story and images come to me that are very clear and very bold and graphic, that makes me sort of lean in, I think, to the material even more. If the characters and the story kind of engage my brain after I've stopped reading, that makes me have to consider something. I'm almost always drawn to the smaller movies. I mean, it's just because those tend to be pushing the form in terms of what we expect of character, what we expect of narrative, and allow some freedom oftentimes in terms of how the visual storytelling comes across. That being said, I've had studio films come my way where I could say, I might, I see how I could put myself in the mix for this one. It hasn't happened in a while, but that's just because I haven't found the thing. I mean, I'm developing something right now at a studio, but once they read the script that the writers write, they may not see the same movie I see. So I think that's another factor, is the creative team imagining the same movie, which of course is a very difficult thing to really quantify early on, but you can get an idea from how people talk about the movies they already love and the movies they're already referencing versus the movie you're all talking about making.
I love the story of you ending up directing The Invitation because your husband Phil Hay is one of the writers, along with his writing partner, Matt Manfredi. And Phil had originally brought you the script to just kind of just look over it. And somehow you kept it to yourself that, ultimately I should be directing this, obviously. And I feel like, like since you bore his child, you should get first dibs on any project that he creates.
Well, yeah, it didn't really quite play out that way. I think it was just, honestly, that it was a moment where, I read pretty much almost everything that they write, and they write all kinds of scripts, and so I think I knew that this was sort of their baby, and this idea and these characters had been gestated with them for so long that I wanted to give them that opportunity to imagine that they might direct it themselves.
Even though, of course, they couldn't.
Like I knew that was a possibility. But then as I started reading it, I was just like, oh my God, like this is why we're married. It's like speaking directly to my heart. And this is why, I just love these guys so much as writers, because there's something so vivid about the writing that I couldn't help but say, if you guys change your mind, please think of me. And then as soon as I said that, I think we all kind of felt like, what, that could really work. And the three of us as a creative team could be a really good team again. And, we'd had a studio experience that as a team that didn't feel so good. And so this was an opportunity to kind of reclaim that process a little bit. And really just make something that felt like ours, and basically know that the way we were going to make it was going to be so low budget, no one was going to fuck with it.
I'm very curious about creative partnerships and how those dynamics play out. One of the things that I saw recently that kind of blew my mind was Sophia Takal's Always Shine. I don't know if that's something that you saw, but I watched that movie. It blew my fucking mind. It was really, really strong acting and strong writing. But, if you look at the genesis of that story, that's another, their partnership extends beyond the creative engagement, because I think it's her husband that writes the story after, talking with her about kind of what her vision would be and where that would go. And sort of the project blooms out of that. I'm very curious how that creative partnership has evolved and where it's going between you and Phil and Matt. Is that a thing that exists in that dynamic, or are they doing their thing and you're doing yours? And when you can find a way to engage together, great, cool, and you do that. Like, what's that dynamic like?
You know, it's really funny. Phil often says this thing about the three of us when we work, which is when we're working, you know, there's like no daylight getting through. Like we really are kind of sharing the same hut, the same tent, the same sort of communal sort of head space, mind space, and we're really working in a very protective manner of each other, like in a very respectful manner, but not so respectful that we can't really exchange ideas.
Right.
And so for me, like when they write, I think they have their own very specific process. They go back and forth, they trade scenes, they sort of work out of order, they map out the story and kind of feel like if the ending isn't as interesting as the beginning, then the story's not solid. Like, you know, they really, they just really have their own way of working because they've done it for so long. And for me, I feel really privileged to kind of have the opportunity to come into that process just a little bit earlier than normal. I'm able to see earlier drafts. I'm able to see, you know, sort of scenes as they're evolving. And what I think is great is that when that happens, I'm pretty much an open channel to a lot of their work. Like I just try and feel how it's working for me, and then I have the great sort of gift of being able to just confer kindly but honestly with them about that, and so it just creates a sense, I think, that we all just pretty much trust each other, you know. And so I like to push them in certain directions in terms of what thematically comes up for me and that I would want to focus on if this was something I was directing. And we you know, we're going through that process again now. There's another thing that they're writing that I'm going to direct hopefully in the fall here in LA. And it's just been so great because they are such idea generators and such truly like tone makers, which a lot of writers and a lot of scripts don't do. I mean, you kind of get this very vague, sort of hazy blueprint of what the story could be or how it could work. They actually really, they really send a message with their writing. You can tell, you know, like you can feel what it should be. And so it's kind of nice to be able to work with them where at that stage, I'm able to talk to them about how I see the thing, and then they sort of work that vision into the script at that point. But they lay the groundwork. I mean, they do all of the heavy lifting when it comes to sort of the fundamentals of the stories.
Well, now you've done the whole gamut of directing your own scripts and then directing you know, their scripts and then other people's scripts. Where do you feel the most creative freedom when it comes to making changes or imposing your own vision?
Yeah, that's a really, I mean, it's funny because of course I could say I felt a lot of creative freedom when I was making Girl Figh, and that, that came from the fact that I had written it, but I'm not sure if it's really true that there's more creative freedom when you've written something. I think it's just, there's the other layer, the added layer that you've written it. And I think it poses the larger question of like, are you capable as a filmmaker of stepping back from the thing you've written and asking yourself if it actually works once it's up on the screen. And so I find that I, on a creative level, can see that a little more clearly when other people's scripts are in the mix. You know, like I think it's a little easier to kind of get that distance. But, you know, of course, there's something like so wonderful about the imaginative space that you're occupying when you're the writer as well. But for me, I kind of feel like the creative freedom comes from like a really unforgiving eye. And so,
I love that.
So for me, I'm trying to keep honing that unforgiving eye and saying, okay, is this working? And if this is working, why do I think it's working? And if it's not working, what's not working about it? And, you know, and a lot of times, I don't know if that's necessarily the script. It's the performance. It's the way the shots work together. It's just the way you feel as you're watching something. And so, I don't know. To me, it's very freeing in some ways to work with other people's scripts. I've discovered, you know, like I didn't know that about myself 15 years ago, but I'm finding that now.
You know, so one of the people that we talked to for this series was Christian Stella. He was the director of photography for The Battery, and he's works with Jeremy Gardner. They just did Tex Montana. But one of the things that he said that really stood out to me was like the way that he kind of phrased that thought that you were talking about, honing your killer instinct with your own work, was that you have to be prepared to just kill your like legitimately, just kill your darlings on the day. And the way that came up in our conversation was, you know, he was talking about, I mean, because The Battery was a zombie movie, low budget. They shot it for $6,000. So, I mean, when we're talking small budget, it's micro budget for them, no resources. So they show up and something doesn't work for the day. They had to be prepared to step back from it and just murder all of the creative content that went into it that wasn't working, and look at the resources in front of them that they had for the day, and then try and creatively on the spot solve whatever problem that they needed to be solved, but still allowed them to build that next brick that was going to go into the mansion that they were building with their project. So my question then is, to segue to that, is, so the invitation to me it's this very linear movie. I think that you guys shot it linearly, like you go through the script as you were shooting it along.
Pretty much, yeah.
The success of that movie is 100% on the control and release of tension, like expertly as you're going along. Like you have to build that as you're going. Did you have the creative freedom on the day when you showed up to a set, if something didn't work, to really mercilessly kill your darlings? Or because of the construct of the invitation, did you get stuck and have to solve problems in smaller boxes?
Well, I mean, I think while on day to day, while we were working, you know, we were really lucky because we did do a pretty, for an indie film, we got about 2.5 days of full rehearsal with the whole cast. So we were able to essentially choreograph the movements of the movie. And, you know, we never went through a full rehearsal as if it were a play of the evening. We never did that, but we did sort of break the movie down into chunks and work through kind of every piece of it, because when you have 12 characters on screen sometimes at the same time, it's just really important to know where are they going in space, how are you laying out this space. You want the audience by the end of the movie to know, like, oh wait, there's also that room they passed downstairs, and there's also that little, you know, there's that little bathroom off of the kitchen. You know, like you want people to remember that there's. I hope that you're thinking about their survival, and
Absolutely.
so you've now kind of paid attention to the space, and to do that with that many characters, you actually really have to kind of choreograph the movie first,
right?
And so in doing that, we ironed out some areas that weren't really kind of singing the way other areas were. And you kind of want your whole movie to sing in some way. And so we made some small refinements as we were working in that rehearsal period. And then during each shooting day, I'm sure there were some moments when things got switched or changed or, you know, eliminated or added. But really, I think the bigger letting go happens when you're cutting, and all of a sudden a scene that you thought was so crucial, you end up just completely eliminating, or a scene you thought meant one thing, you realize means another. And so I think that's kind of how I felt I needed to confront the killing of one's darlings, you know, because it really had more to do with, now this thing is up on a screen,
right?
Put together, does it work? And you know, I'm really lucky that I was able to work in that rehearsal period, because that also allowed us to kind of refine moments that wouldn't have been able to be refined until the day, which would have been kind of like a lot of time taken toward that.
So when you're in pre-production for The Invitation, you've talked about having a very visual engagement with the material that you gravitate towards, and then you've talked about almost like thinking of this movie as a dance that you have to go through and do. I guess the twofold question is: did you storyboard the shit out of this? Are you visual in that way, or go ahead?
Well, that's an interesting question because I feel like in my earlier films, I was a lot more bound to visual strategies that were very particular and did involve a lot of storyboarding. And granted, the shot listing and storyboarding that happened for Girl Figh happened, I think, because I simply wanted to be as prepared as I could, knowing that I wasn't necessarily going to be pulling out like some, newfound genius out of a hat on set. I actually wanted to just kind of show up with as much ammunition as possible to do my job well. And then with Aeon Flux, I think there was so much stuff that required so many visual effects and so much stuff that just required a plan for the entire team to see that required that movie be storyboarded. And I had similar sequences like it in Jennifer's Body that just had a very specific visual plan. But with The Invitation, as we were prepping in the house, like the house became kind of our film production office as well.
Oh, that's wild.
And so I was able to sit with Bobby, the DP, kind of in those living room spaces and in the kitchen and back by the pool. And we were able to just start feeling, kind of how the light worked in the house throughout the day and just what, it was a weird, spooky house, weirdly. I mean, it's a beautiful house, but we were sort of having to confront it every day. And the more we did that, I felt it was kind of harder to really storyboard because we knew our rehearsals were coming and that so much was going to shift once we got everybody in the space. And that ended up totally being true. There were so many, characters and actors who would say, I just feel like I need to be the person who keeps refilling their drink or, and so with that kind of character point in mind, we had to make room for all of that stuff. And so it was more important to me to know what the emphasis of the scenes were so that even if I didn't have storyboards per se, I would have a shot list that would be clear enough to say, I need a point of view shot of and a corresponding close up with these two characters in order to communicate this moment. And that just had to be something I knew I had to check off a list because it's really hard with that many characters. You can't cover everybody. So you sort of have to choose your battles and decide, okay, where does your story really lie? And in this case, it remained true that it was always going to be with Will, our protagonist. And so in some ways that was kind of the guiding principle. We knew in many respects the movie was told from his point of view. And thankfully that limited the audience's access to sort of truth in a way, because you started to realize, wait a second, is he actually the most reliable point of view to be looking through? And on the one hand he's not, and on the other hand he's also right. So that was what we were playing with.
I love that so much about The Invitation. It's like, is this dude crazy or is shit about to get weird? And the answer is maybe both.
Totally. And that was what was exciting about it for me, was I really did kind of feel like both things were true about the film. I do think he is mentally and emotionally unraveling in front of us. And this is going to be, because of him, a lot of crazy stuff is going to happen. But the question is, what other crazy stuff is being brought to bear on the story, and I felt like that was a kind of really fascinating dynamic to get to work with.
I imagine with you first doing the pre-production in the house and then all of the actors coming in and shooting the film in sequence in the house, I imagine did that feed a lot of the tension? Did that help grow the tension doing the film in sequence?
It did, because I think, we had this remarkable kind of experience where the characters and the actors, while oftentimes very different from one another, everyone just became really close on set and kind of in our downtime. So it was a really interesting thing to see that the relationships formed really quickly in front of the camera and behind the camera. And so as we were shooting and having these moments that felt kind of real and authentic, and it felt like everyone was just doing really good work and nobody was there, frankly, for the money. And so it just sort of creates a really fruitful, creative environment if you just kind of submit to the fact that you're not there for the money. You're there to just do some interesting work for a while. The anxiety started to grow as you would look at the call sheets coming up and look at the schedule like, oh God, now we are going to lose this person. Oh God, this person's going to disappear, and so it was kind of an interesting thing to realize, like there's a kind of, and then there were none moment. And it's sad. It's like, there's something kind of sad about it, but that was such a benefit of having done the movie, having shot the movie mostly in sequence. It just made perfect sense for us. We were very lucky to be able to do that. I would love to find a way to do that on all movies from now on, but I think it's kind of an impossibility.
And I bet you shot it in 20 days, and I bet on day 21, everybody just openly wept and held each other.
There were definitely some tears. But it's like, the funniest thing about that set was that the more intense it got, and it did get really intense, and we had like really lovely kind of beautiful moments with all the actors getting to kind of really dig, and that was so fun. We were all just having the best time when the camera wasn't rolling. It was so funny. It's like we would play categories at lunch, and people would bring their kids to set, and it was just really mellow. So I feel like even though the environment while we were shooting was quite charged, the working feeling of the whole thing, the spirit of it, was actually really positive.
All right, I want to kind of subject shift for just a second. Lisa is looking at me with big eyes at the moment. I'm going to throw this to her. I'm not sure that she's expecting what I'm going to throw to her, so we'll see how it handles. If it goes poorly, it's on me. She was telling me before we started talking about the script that you wrote and were trying to sell.
A body horror
Yes,
script?
Please, Lisa, take it away.
That you're the film that you wanted to follow Girl Figh, which is like a fairly traditional, even though it has the gender switch, it's a sports movie with winning and stuff. And you wanted to follow that up with a sci-fi film about a man who is, through sci-fi means, transitioning into a woman by accident or circumstances. And it includes a scene where his balls fall off.
Is this internet rumor, or is this?
I just really want to see this movie, and
it's not internet rumor. That is definitely true. That I was trying to make that movie for many years, and I'd be interested to see if it could ever get revived. But yeah, it was a movie that I had co-written with a partner, and we both are huge lovers of body horror kinds of films, and particularly Cronenberg. And and just there was something about this story that to me felt like this really elemental shapeshifter kind of story about a guy who hasn't really examined his privilege, but more than that, really hasn't examined his life at all. And essentially starts to get really ill. And what we realize is, he thinks he's like maybe dying of cancer or something, but what's happening is he's sort of essentially being reborn, but into a woman. And so it's about a sort of process of shedding the superficial male identity and then having to kind of live inside a woman's body and sort of live with what that means when you walk through the world. And it's interesting because a lot of people who read it at the time, I mean, this was in the early 2000s, right after I'd made Girl Figh, they just were really freaked out by it. I think it's still got something about it that's like, people want to laugh at that idea. Like there's this interesting thread that would happen, which was that certain financing entities would say, we just wish it was a comedy.
Oh my God.
Right.
And it's
No.
Yeah, nope, it's not a comedy. Like it's really like you're really meant to feel the terror and the just the sorrow that this guy feels to lose himself, like to literally see himself waste away to become something he doesn't want to be. And so that process of kind of sending it out, and I mean, it's like I was so lucky. I had Jeremy Renner eventually attached to play one side and to have Rachel Weisz play the other side of that character. But they weren't really kind of big enough stars at the time. And I think there was just a real terror of the material because it was treated like a tragedy to be, to grapple with not feeling in alignment between your mind and body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, maybe today's environment is different in that those identity politics are being much more openly discussed. But then I also wonder if the movie would be misread as some kind of judgmental polemic. It's not that thing either. It's just about what does it mean to inhabit a body, And so that's something I'm very interested by, because I think for most people, the goal is just to actually sort of feel where you are, like actually be in your body. And certainly for actors, that kind of is such a crucial step in being able to be a great actor, I think, is to inhabit yourself and in doing so inhabit other characters. But so I saw it as this kind of like meta experiment that also happened to have a real strong kind of genre component. But the storytelling also sort of changed over the course of the film in terms of the writing. And in some ways I still haven't cracked something about that movie. So like, on the one hand, maybe it didn't get made because it was too ahead of its time and blah, blah, blah. But it also maybe didn't get made because the script isn't good enough. Like I'm still trying to like work it out. But it's definitely one of those movies where it's just like, I do hope at some point to be able to make a movie like that, because it's, we just kind of haven't seen it before.
Yeah.
We've felt things like it, but we haven't really seen it before and really experienced that story yet.
I'm number one, I'm 100% sold on your pitch. If that movie would show up in the fucking theater tomorrow.
We have combined probably about $11. I don't know how far that will take you.
But I think that one of the things that I love about genre movies, I think that genre movies can be fun. They can have that sort of zany element. They can be playful. They have a freedom to kind of do the things that they want. But the best genre movies they're doing some serious filmmaker shit while they're talking about these issues. Like the ones that we gravitate to, like they have more than my go-to example. I know it's such an easy one off the cuff, but like Shaun of the Dead for me, it's a zombie comedy movie. There's a lot of fun with it that they're going on with it, but there's more philosophical elements that he's working with in this playful way.
Absolutely.
And so what I hear you telling me that you wanted to make this David Cronenberg body horror genre movie that gets into identity politics and what it means to be a person. That's amazing. But so is that, like we were talking sort of about future projects and interests and stuff. Do you see yourself as a genre? Are you a genre director? Are you a genre director? I mean, can you be a serious filmmaker and a genre director?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like personally, I don't think Roman Polanski made a single film that wasn't a genre film in some way.
Word.
Or there was a heyday for John Carpenter where he was, I think, making really serious genre films.
Holy shit, yes.
So it's just, for me, it's just a question of like, again, it's kind of like what we were talking about at the very beginning. It's like, for me, it's just, I do see myself as a serious filmmaker. And what's fascinating is that on the one hand, we sort of poo-poo the idea of genre. Like somehow that's operating in a different class, as if it's like the redheaded stepchild or something, right. And it's just so interesting because that's where so many of the most kind of watershed cultural ideas get introduced into the mainstream culture. Whether you're watching a movie like Alien or Seven or The Thing, yes, or Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like, or Rosemary's Baby. It's like, yes, all of these movies are global treasures, cultural treasures.
Yes.
And we absolutely need them to survive as a culture because it's the way we can talk about issues about domination and issues about our humanness.
Yes.
I mean, this is the stuff of making art. And so
yes,
if I'm going to make movies, I kind of feel like genre often is like, it's just the frame that you put the painting in, it's just the room that the art walks into and gets looked at. I mean, it's the genre itself isn't I don't know, that's sort of not what I focus on, but I do happen to find that, like I always talked about The Invitation as a drama that goes just haywire. And I think there were a lot of people who were just sort of like, well, but what is it? Is it a drama or is it a movie that goes haywire? And I'm like, it's both.
Right.
It does have an emotional horror component. It is psychological suspense. But I refuse to say that it doesn't also function as a satisfying drama for grown-ups that just happens to get really batshit crazy at the end. And I think we should have the opportunity to see those movies and make those movies. Like Shaun of the Dead should be allowed to be hilariously funny, but it should also, by the end, kind of leave you with this, I want to say, hope for humanity. Mm-hmm. That's what makes that movie work so beautifully. Mm-hmm. Is there something much deeper going on in the themes of the filmmaking? And so, I guess for me, like, I see genre as just like the great sort of. It's the vessel, but
right.
it's not the thing itself.
It's not the
just
truth.
Sort of it's just the container,
Right.
And that's why some containers, I guess, are just not that. They're pretty flimsy, and then others are much more muscular, much more sturdy, much more long lasting, and those end up being the great works of art in film, and it's a little bit of a tragedy to me that there's so many good horror films right now, interesting sci-fi ideas out there that aren't really kind of getting the treatment that they deserve by serious filmmakers. And I'm excited by the fact that right now you can have an Arrival be nominated for an Oscar. You can have a Babadook be a very successful, low budget horror film, and I feel really gratified that people consider The Invitation a success, like creatively as they watch it. Like, that's so awesome. That was just the freaky movie I needed to make. And I'm glad I got it out of my system, but I never saw it as like sort of checking anybody's boxes, like I never saw it on a business level. And so I guess that's the thing, back to one of your original questions. I almost never look at a movie in that way, like, which has served me well in some instances and not really served me well in others, I suppose.
I was about to ask another question, and then you said something, and it sparked another question. So I'm in that place where I'm going, do I ask the last question or do I ask the new question? So I'll just go with my original question.
Sure.
And then maybe I'll tack on that second question. I'm very sneaky like that. But like with genre film, like you saying genre being this container, right? I feel like sometimes genre film can force a perspective that is hard to see and cannot necessarily be told in a way. And now hearing the full fleshed out idea behind your body horror film. Just part of the missing piece of gender inequality is a man just can't imagine what it's like to go out into the world as a woman every day. Like there's just not a day where we can just leave our gender at home and and go and face the world. And so I was just wondering, like, as a female director and constantly being described as a female director, and how that influences your approach to getting films, and how you feel like that's affected your career. Because I'm sure, like, there are opportunities that you've gotten or not gotten, and you have to ask yourself that question of, well, is it because I'm female, or is it because like it wasn't good enough, or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating to me that just the notion of being female, even the way we talk about it, like it's literally treated like a scarlet letter, like just being female, you've already kind of like gone off the path. You've already fucked up. You're female, like you've got that like F branded into your forehead now. And so that's an interesting kind of position to be in, because, I just made this. I just had a short film that's part of an anthology of shorts called XX that are all directed by women, and it's wonderful to be able to talk about it. But it's fascinating how much it kind of has to become about the fact that all the films are directed by women,
right?
And I know that the producers and financiers of the project just saw it as an opportunity to just kind of fill a gap, just give some opportunities to some women who wanted to make something and be thrown a little bit of money and be given a lot of creative freedom to just make something. And yet there's this insistence on the female question. And for me personally, it's like I've been doing this now for like 17 years. Right. So it's hard for me to say what it's like to be a female filmmaker anymore, because it's I'm not even sure how to answer it. And as it relates to the question of like, sort of, why aren't there more of them? I realize I'm not the person to ask, like we should be asking the people who routinely don't hire women.
Right.
We should be kind of asking the question of sort of society at large. And so it's just this interesting thing that happens where I think because there aren't a ton of female filmmakers, we're put in the position to have to sort of answer for all of humanity in a way. And that gets a little tricky because, of course, that's really easy to answer incorrectly. And, who wants to put one's foot in one's mouth like that? But beyond that, it also just kind of creates this sense of like misdirect from a larger conversation about creativity and process itself.
Exactly.
And there's so many male filmmakers who just aren't asked to talk about how potential advantages, potential privilege, their status as male filmmakers, how has that affected their process?
I imagine that it's great.
What's it like to be a man making movies? It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the other question is like, is it a really short conversation? But then I realized too that there's, one thing I have learned, having been in the business now for more than a couple years, and really having had now what I realize is this like wealth of experience in both indie films, studio films, shorts, television. I'm blessed to say I'm both a survivor and have a lot of stamina. But what I'm really learning is it's really hard for a lot of people. Like it's really hard for women, but it's really hard for a lot of men who don't conform to a certain kind of larger idea about playing the game. Yeah. And so, I mean, every now and then you get your P.T. Andersons or you get your Quentin Tarantinos, but I suspect those guys are probably pretty tortured too. Like, I don't think they arrive at their ideas without conflict or some kind of like stormy horizon. You know what I mean? So like, I'm really trying to be both constructively alert and kind of alert to and vigilant around the issue of this inequity between men and women in this business and in all disciplines of fucking life at this point.
Yeah.
But I'm also trying to see myself outside of just that framework and really try and understand kind of like the what this brings up on a larger level for the human condition, because this is actually not a sustainable situation. You know, like if women are systematically kind of oppressed, repressed, suppressed, enslaved, all of those things lead to the destruction of civilization. Right. And so I really want to figure out like what it means to be part of the solution, but I'm not quite sure how to do that.
It's hard enough to just be a filmmaker, and you have to be an advocate for all women as well. It's got to be exhausting.
Yeah. It is exhausting because it's so exhausting to like make good movies. It's also really fucking exhausting to make bad movies. So like for me, like, you know, like just the process of the work is really hard. Like I'm not going to lie, whether I'm firing on all cylinders or am completely crippled and don't even know it creatively, it's hard to make movies. And so it's you're right that it's like an added burden to have to feel like I'm speaking for anyone but myself.
Right.
You know, because myself is like a lot of ping pongs flying around in my brain. Like I've got a lot of ideas I'm wrestling with, and some of them contradict each other. So, you know, it's hard being human. That's my new mantra.
Fuck yeah, I like that.
Speaking to your stamina and the ups and downs of your career, you've had these successes, like, you know, starting with Girl Figh, you know, being such a success at Sundance and having the, you know, all of that acclaim, and then, you know, it doesn't do as well in the box office, and you know, you have like these ups and downs in your career, and with Invitation kind of being finally this springboard and this, how does that feel to, does it make you wary?
No, I'm a lot smarter now. I'm a lot, you know, frankly, I'm just a lot older. And so it does help me to like, you know, this is a moment where like life experience matters. This is a moment where like the fact that I have kind of a little more perspective than I did when I was 30, it really matters. Like it gives me so much more of the tools I need to soberly see the opportunities in front of me that come from making a movie like Invitation, and understand that some opportunities aren't really opportunities, you know, or they aren't the right ones for me, you know. And so if I wanted to be making big studio movies, I suppose it's fair to say I could be doing that right now. I actually could be, but I'm not. I've just learned my lesson, you know, like I thought I could be this, I thought I could be the exception when I made Aeon Flux, and I was wrong. Maybe there's another moment for me where I'll have a little bit more, you know, credibility, a little bit more experience under my belt, a little bit more kind of command of the interpersonal relationships as you make big studio movies, where I could make one and reap the kind of rewards that other filmmakers can in that system. But I don't know if I'm there yet. Like I'm you know, like I'm willfully unpolitical when it comes to the interpersonal relationships with the filmmaking team around me, and that includes the studio executives and the producers and the movie stars, and that has hurt me in the past. And I'm not sure I want to become more political so I can join that club. I'd almost just rather find another club, you know what I mean? For me, that's gonna have like rules that make better sense to me, and you know, better snacks in the rec room, you know. So like, I'm much more attuned to the fact that like, I don't want to subscribe to some kind of preordained notion of what success is for me. I'm actually finding that like success for me is you know, figuring out a way to like survive economically, but also then do that in such a way where it allows me the privilege to have creative freedom, ideally from film to film. You know, like I I know that there are those really well-known stories of filmmakers like Scorsese who says, one for me, one for them.
Right.
I'd like to dream big for myself at this point and just say, if I can figure it out and keep the scale of the film small enough, I want every movie to be for me, because they take too long to make and women get fewer shots statistically. So every movie needs to be for me, to be selfish about it.
No, I this whole definition of like, what does success mean for me? I think Lisa and I have talked about this a little bit after we saw Don't Think Twice at a film festival, and one of the characters grapples with that is like, what is their definition of success? Is my success what everybody sort of seems to want, or is it what I want, and what does that look like? I think that's such an interesting thing for people to struggle through and figure out. I mean, I guess, I mean, I think you kind of basically covered it. I mean, it seems like you reach a point in your life, the way that you said, soberly evaluate the options in front of me, like that rings to me as true. I'll tell you, like, I love to love things. Yeah. I like stuff. I like liking stuff. Yes. I get excited. I get way too excited. You can ask either of the two people at the table around me. I get too fucking excited about things. That's all I see is the excitement. That's sober evaluation. I'm 35, so like I feel like I should be trending. When does the sober evaluation ability achievement unlock? Like, is that do I have to hit a certain age, or do I need to experience something, because I can't figure that out for myself right now?
Well, I mean, look, boundless enthusiasm and being both a student of life and a fan of all these like art forms and stuff in culture, like that's essential to enjoying life, I think. And so I hope to never lose that. It's more just that I'm starting to see that, like, before I used to kind of like really take every offer, every script, every relationship really seriously. And I used to kind of treat each of them with an equal amount of respect. When the fact is, I'm not being evaluated in that same metric from the other side, and so for me, I realized I actually just have to start living for and speaking for myself here, and so, it's funny. It's like, sometimes people frame things to me as like, oh, this is an amazing opportunity. You've got to really take this one seriously. And if it isn't for me, it just isn't. And I'm not going to wrestle with it anymore. I'm not going to like second guess myself. And I think that's what I mean by the sober part. It's kind of more just like recognizing at this point that what might excite the filmmaker sitting next to me won't necessarily excite me on a professional, creative level. And I also have like a really rich personal life that allows me to kind of feel really protective of something bigger than just the films I want to make. And there was a time when I never thought there was going to be anything bigger than that. Just, I like the films were always going to be the most important thing. And now, though, it's tremendously important, and I don't want to undersell what a big deal it is to me to make good movies and to keep making them until I'm like, old and they just like throw me off a set. I still know that if it all had to go away tomorrow so that I could, be with my son and be with my family and kind of have that sense that there's something more than me, I'd have to trade it in a second. Like I couldn't even really think about it. So that's a really weird, life-changing thing to confront for me. So I feel thankful that that's happened,
You've blown both of our minds. These are excellent words of wisdom that you've just shared. I'm taking notes and I'm like, live life smarter. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to try and be more aware of what I need to do now.
That's really funny. That's really funny. I love it. Can I give you then, if you're if you're feeling open and actually taking notes, it's funny.
This is legitimately correct, and I am.
It speaks to my life right now in this moment.
Well, so I will say that, like, having just come off directing 12 amazing actors in The Invitation,
Right.
I had the opportunity to really have to like step up and figure out like, okay, what can I say that's like simple and actually has purpose in this creative process of like trying to figure out if a moment's working, if a line's working, is that interaction working, blah, 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 you know, the work of working with actors. And the one thing I really started to kind of get in touch with was like this thing, are you here? Are you here? And I would just go through a checklist like, okay, I want you to like just stand here. Let's not argue about this scene or talk about these words. I just want you to stand in front of me, feel your feet on the ground, feel your own body, take a few deep breaths, be here, and then we will resume. And I had to do it with them. It's not like I was already at that state. It was as much for me, you know, it was as much for me, a reminder for me that like nothing good is going to happen until we're all here in the same room and our minds and bodies are kind of aligned and we're just like looking at each other and we're like present for each other. Yeah. And I gotta say, it had some real, it paid some dividends. It was actually like, it started to work. And I'm finding that for me, I just like have to like feel like, am I here or not? You know, super simple. But that leads to like living smarter is my what I think I'm saying.
Right. No, I'm completely tracking what you're saying. The execution, I think, is where it becomes complicated.
I haven't been here for months. For months.
And you know what? That's really interesting because in this, I don't know what your guys' politics are, and I'm not going to make any assumptions.
Sure.
But I think it's really easy for kind of all of us on all sides of the political spectrum to say, have we been present? And now we're getting really present. Mm-hmm. Like I think we're really, I think we're really having to sort of get to know the process of politics, get to know the world we're living in, pay a little bit closer attention, not just to the words, but to the meanings in between the words and the meanings in what's not said or not done. And so I'm really feeling like maybe in what, for me, if I may offer my opinion of today's political climate, I think we're living in a kind of political catastrophe.
Yeah.
I actually think amazing things are going to come out of it because we're more alive and present and feeling and seeing and absorbing than ever before. You know, we're not just, it's not business as usual. Every single day is not business as usual. And so we're kind of all forced to really like figure out, okay, how can I be part of the solution? Like, you know, no more sitting on the sidelines. It's very interesting to me. So
I think you're 100% correct. I know that there is a tendency for people to focus on the negative of the current environment. Like that's a lot of the conversation is how terrible things are. And that's not invalid. And there's value to exploring that because it helps you understand the challenges that you need to overcome.
Yeah.
But I think that positive focus of what could come out of this is essential. I think it's essential to finding the way forward because with if you focus too much on the negative, this is my personal experience. So never mind politics or anything like that exactly, but like whenever I focus too much on the negative outcomes of things, I find that you tend to realize negative things just by virtue of focusing on them. And I more than ever in the last month have seen a shift from like friends and folks that I know go from this sort of like bedroom, activism on Facebook. I don't want to knock it too hard. I'm sounding like I'm being hypercritical maybe. But like there's a shift away from like, oh, let me post this article on Facebook and I really fucking stuck it to him. I nailed that. I got the right quip with this, like the snark was too much of the focus. I'm 100% guilty of that. So I'm pointing the finger at me. But like I've seen a shift away from that where people focus on what could be, what could be next and what could we accomplish in this environment. And I think that's heartening.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And, making art and talking about it and having a community that does that, which you guys are doing, that's all part of, progress as well. So I think it's kind of great.
Fuck and yes. This is good stuff. This is all great. This is blowing my mind. Sorry that now I'm like this was not on my list of things that I thought we would get into, and I'm just.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's all perfect. I just don't know how to segue into the next thing. Let me do this. So for then, right? Okay. So let's take it through the filmmaking lens, right? Art is important. Art and perspective on this issue is going to be something that's hugely important. I'm a little bit curious. I know we're kind of pushing the boundaries of time, but if you want to take a few minutes to get into it, I would love to hear how your relationship with Game Changer bloomed in the development of The Invitation. Because I'm like I am in love with the idea of what they're trying to do and frustrated by the necessity of it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And I was really lucky to get introduced to them early. They had just sort of gotten that film fund together, and so I was able to kind of be a part of a first wave of films that they were looking at, and I got like sort of fast, thoughtful attention, and they came in really, like after a long time of trying to get the movie made, Game Changer showed up, sort of to the party, and it was like, oh, okay, that's an opportunity, and they ended up really just kind of seeing what the movie could be, appreciating the fact that it was sort of a genre hybrid film, and feeling thankful that one of their filmmakers could be sort of have some experience under her belt and be so they felt kind of safer, I think, with that investment bet, and
right.
And, it was great. It was a great experience. I got Final Cut. I got to just make my movie. It was it's hard to make movies. When you're ultimately, even, whether you're making a movie for $10,000 or $1 million or even $3 million, I find what starts to happen is you're just asking for tons of favors. And in my case, that meant, my composer working for free, my music supervisor working for free, stuff like that is really hard. But, on a creative level, it was just great because a lot of the people who work at Game Changer are just like smart, interesting people who had interesting perspectives, but also didn't see themselves as filmmakers who had to kind of give me a note, and then I had to go do that note.
Right.
It was a much more open process than that. So it was great. It was great.
Do you mind expanding on what the level of collaboration was like between them? Because the dynamic that I'm interested in exploring just a little bit is like we talked with Travis Stevens and David Lawson at Snowfort Pictures.
Yep.
And the high level summary of that is like basically it seems like a lot of times people think that the production companies are like the money stooges, and they show up and they want to give notes and like, well, if you want these dollars, you got to do these things. But like, they tend to be people with experience, and provided that you're engaging with the right companies, they come in with a collaborative interest and an ability to creatively solve problems where, you not necessarily you, proverbial you, might not have the idea or the knowledge or whatever it is that's required to do that. What level of collaboration was there between you and Game Changer in the course of actually making the movie?
They were actually pretty hands-off, and I would just say that was because there was really already a pretty strong producing team in place, but they seemed like people who would have been capable of being really good creative partners, because they had this sort of as their mandate, a respect for the filmmaker and the filmmaking process. But, I agree with you that there are some companies that are much more involved, and it's always a bonus when that happens. It's a bonus if there's, if there are people in those scenarios who are actually thoughtful, perceptive people and who can help you kind of realize the best film. I think it gets a little dicey when everybody has a different idea of what that film is. But again, that's just kind of part of the it's just part of the weird voodoo of making movies,
So unless Lisa has anything? Darren, do you have anything?
I do have a question.
All right, let's get Darren question.
I'm still here, Karyn. I've been silently
Hi.
judging everyone. Between having and taking care of a family, directing, working in television, and also film, being so well versed in genre and things like that, does your life afford you time and opportunity to fangirl out about things, whether it be with your peers or other creative endeavors that are going on in our culture? Do you have time to sample some of these things out here for us?
You know, it's funny. It's like I would say the past 3 years, I've been working pretty much nonstop in this way that while I would have some time here and there, and I would go to art shows and theater and some dance and concerts, and like I would try to do all that stuff, but it felt like it was much harder to do. After the end of 2016, I sort of said I need to slow down. Like, I can financially for a beat afford to do that, and I need to I just need to take in more of the world, and so I feel like now is the beginning of a process where I kind of get reacquainted with a lot of culture. I mean, I really try to make it a concerted effort, because I don't really see how I don't. It's hard for me to live in a kind of a bubble where I'm not actually interacting with a lot of other kinds of work. So I'm actually now in a moment where I'm kind of stepping back out into looking at art and just being aware of what other people are doing, even just watching movies. Like, that was the thing that was getting kind of hard when I was working so much, was there was just so much less time for me to be watching movies. And now I'm kind of like, you know what? I'm going to make a lot of time. I'm going to go see, documentaries. I'm going to go, watch the full 8-hour screening of OJ Made in America.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Nice.
Like, I'm going to do those things because I feel like I just kind of have to do it. Like, now that I have the time, I have to make that my work. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but
what are you digging on right now? Like, what's standing out to you creatively that other people are doing? Like, what's hitting you right?
Well, I am reading right now based on Arrival. I picked up Stories of Your Life and Others, the Ted Chiang short stories, and I'm really enjoying those. And I'm reading a collection of Ursula Le Guin stories called The Unreal and the Real, which has been pretty awesome. I'm trying to think, like, movie wise, like, I'm sort of trying to dive back in, but there's this documentary called Fire at Sea that I'm about to watch that I'm pretty psyched about. I'm going to go see this performance of the Wooster Group at a theater here in LA, and they're going to basically reenact a crazy town hall conversation that happened between Norman Mailer and a bunch of radical feminists in the 70s. That seems really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just trying to just experience stuff. And some of it works and some of it won't work. But it's been good. I mean, honestly, like, going to marches and that kind of stuff too, for me, is like a way to reconnect with the world, because it reminds me, oh, that's right, other people they're kind of like concerned about some of the same things. I'm not alone, you know? So it's been really interesting. I'm just trying to be a sponge.
Right.
Does your sign say something cute? Do you have a cute sign? Do you have a quippy sign?
I didn't have a very quirky sign. But I saw a bunch of signs that I loved, and I really liked this one that just said the revolution will be intersectional. And I really, I believe that to be true, that, when all of these various movements kind of come together and say, you know what, we would be so much more powerful if we all just sort of spoke from one platform together. It just excited me. It just made me really, really, really excited to think about the possibilities, So, yeah, life is good.
Right.
I mean, in a manner of speaking.
It's not the apocalypse.
Not yet.
Yeah,
Not yet.
Not yet. Not tonight.
Probably not tomorrow too.
Yeah.
So one the thing that I like to kind of end these discussions on is, so for you, you've been making movies for coming up on 2 decades.
Mm-hmm.
What single moment do you look back at now that brings you the most gratitude, the most personal satisfaction, or the most pride, however you want to construct that? What's the thing that you look back at and you say, that moment, that's the thing?
On a professional level?
Yeah, I mean,
Or personal.
I
Up to
take
you.
personal, because filmmaking is life. Life is filmmaking, if this is what you've been doing. So, I mean, I'll take it however you want to interpret it.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to go straight to the first thing that came to my mind, which
Do it.
is I'd had a really difficult pregnancy and like throwing up into trash cans and just like life feeling like, oh my God, this was such a mistake, and not feeling physically great, and then had a baby in the hospital, and it was kind of just like a long, somewhat traumatic experience. And they, in the middle of the night, the nurse brought in this mewling creature that was my son, and she just sort of like helped me. I was like so sleepy and out of it, and she just sort of like, the nurse was like kind of just giving me the basics of breastfeeding, and this little tiny person with a full head of hair and a face just like locked eyes with me, and I could feel like lightning through my body that this person looked at me and said, okay, you're the one, like we are connected, it's on. And I really felt like there was something creative in that moment of connection, and something like life-altering for me. Not for everyone. It's not everyone's narrative.
Sure.
But for me, I was just like, I'm like looking into the past. I'm looking into the future, and it's all kind of right here. And I don't know. It gave me again that sense that like there's big mysterious stuff out there in life and art and culture that we got to grapple with, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a beautiful answer. I love that. Darren's a father. I have 3 daughters. I feel what you're saying right now. I feel what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's perfect. This was a really great conversation. Thank you so much for coming out and talking.
Thank you. I know it's too bad I can't see your faces, but
We're really attractive.
You know.
Yes, we're very good looking. Big smiles.
I love it. I believe it.
So we've got XX is coming out on the 17th of February.
Yep.
Limited theatrical and VOD. Is that the plan for that?
That is correct. That is correct.
And do you have anything else that you would like to plug or call attention? Place for people to find your work? Anything like that?
Not really. No. I mean, I'm just gonna try and get my next movie made, and then I'll maybe talk to you again, and then I'll have something to plug.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
All right, good.
No, this is perfect. Thank you so much for coming out. Have a beautiful night.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
And so there you have it. Karyn Kusama, ladies and gentlemen.
Are your minds blown? I bet they are.
Yep. That was awesome. You
I
two
think-
did a very good job.
I
Thank
think
you.
that she adopted me. You couldn't tell, but she did, and I'm hers now.
I don't know. There was some conversation about paperwork afterwards. I wasn't sure.
Legalities. But nonetheless, another successful interview, if I may say so. I told you, I had fun judging you all. Lisa, you did excellent as always.
Thank
True
you.
fact.
Indie Dork,
You killed it.
yes, you did. So again,
So I
thank
would have
you.
accepted so-so.
So her next, most recent project
Yes.
coming up is the horror anthology XX, which should be released around the time that this is out.
Yeah. It may already be out. Check your VODs. Check your local theaters. Go support that shit at the movie theater.
Yeah.
Come on.
Also, if you haven't seen The Invitation, you should be correcting that ASAP.
And Girl Fight. I watched that for the first time today, and it
Yeah.
was amazing.
Yes, it was. Yes, it is.
Michelle
amazing. Sorry.
Rodriguez looking absolutely young and adorable.
Her very first film, yeah.
It's so good.
And intense. Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
That movie was really good.
Yeah. So another successful ITMOD CHATcast in the bag. Thank you all for joining us.
And if you, after you watch The Invitation, you can go back in time, go back in our Podbean timeline and listen to our ITMOD Film Club episode of The Invitation, because it was just the dorks dorking out about an amazing film.
Yes.
That you also love now that you've watched it.
As an ITMOD listener, I can verify.
Yay!
It's good shit.
Yay. So Indie Dork, tell the people where they can find you.
You can find me on the Twitters at WBDAS.
Wife Dork,
Yes.
if one were so inclined.
You can find me on Twitter at Sidewalk Siren, Instagram at Sidewalk Siren, and Letterboxd at Sidewalk Siren. Go look at my stars for Girl Figh.
And if you are absolutely going through withdrawals and you definitely miss Mouth Dork and the Turtle Dork, you can follow them at Mouth Dork on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, and Untapped. And you can also find the Turtle Dork at the Turtle Dork on Twitter and at the Turtle Dork 1 on Instagram. And on Facebook, he is Brian William Young. He's also on Letterboxd, I think, but he doesn't utilize it.
He doesn't post it enough.
Yeah.
He fell through on that ITMOD dork resolution.
Yeah.
Persistence. It's important.
Yeah, we learned that from Karyn Kusama.
Yeah. And being present. You got to be present at Letterboxd, and you got to be persistent, and you got to rate shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm present as Darren Smith, the Disco Dork. on
I
Twitter,
like how
Instagram.
we were talking about when we were talking about, like, what are you enjoying? And so far, all she's had time to enjoy is short stories. Did you notice that?
That's the
I've
life-
only had time for short stories.
the
Okay,
life
sorry.
of a filmmaker. That's
Sorry,
that's
Darren.
what it is. That's okay. I am on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd at the Disco Dork. Again, thank you everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed the interview. Go watch the movie. As Lisa said, listen to the ITMOD Cast Film Club selection of The Invitation, and we hope you enjoyed that as well. So that's going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening.
And until next